Hi, everyone. I'm your host, Patty Giarrusso, and this is Let's Talk Pets on Society Bites Radio. Today, we welcome to the show Gretchen Staab. She's the owner of Dawg Swim. And we want to help you understand what to do in a pet medical emergency. This is something that all pet owners should know. So today we're going to learn some basic information about how to help pets in emergency situations and the importance of taking pet CPR and first aid classes. Gretchen is the owner of Dawg Swim and has worked with animals all her life. Gretchen has dedicated 30 plus years caring for a wide variety of domestic and exotic animals. She holds a bachelor's degree in Equine Science from Colorado State University. She's a certified pet tech, pet CPR, and first aid instructor, teaching people how to take immediate, potentially life-saving action for their pets before and while transporting them to a vet. Gretchen says it's her pleasure working with people to help pets. So sorry about my throat, Gretchen, but welcome to the show.
Well, thank you for the lovely introduction, and thank you for having me.
Yeah, so we want to talk about this because it's a really important topic. People ask me, as the owner and president of a pet welfare organization, questions every day about pet medical emergencies. And, everybody likes to Google stuff, and we always worry about that. So why don't you talk about some of the most important things that you think are helpful for people to know how to help their pet during an emergency?
Well, I like that you said people Google things or try to watch a video or read a book. And in an emergency situation, it's very stressful. And trying to recall what you've seen in a video or read in a book can be very difficult. So one of the things I love about what I teach is that we actually practice the skills. So in an emergency, it comes back into muscle memory, and you know how to stay calm and be confident. So the number one action for survival in any emergency is to breathe and stay calm. The number one mistake people make is to panic. But there are several things that you can do just as a pet parent, basic things you can do. Always have a first aid kit on hand with bandages and antibiotics like Neosporin or Benadryl. It's interesting. Everybody thinks to have a first aid kit for themselves. I find very few people think about having a first aid kit for your pets.
Yeah, that's right.
And everyone should have one in their car. The other mistake people make is that they always have one at home, but it's very important to have one in your car, easy to store under the passenger seat or the driver's seat. Because if you think about it, most of the time your emergencies are going to be when you're out hiking or camping or boating or traveling with your pets. You may not be close to home to have all your emergency supplies.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I suppose too, if you come upon an injured animal, then you'll be prepared for that as well.
Exactly. This doesn't apply only to your pets, but I know most of us who find an injured pet want to help, and we may not know what to do. And most of the time that's going to be when you're out and about driving or walking through the park. So you want to have all the supplies you need in your car in addition to your home.
So what do you feel are some of the most important things, just giving, an interview today, what would be some of the top things that you would want to be able to get across to people in the case of an emergency?
Well, the first thing is always stay calm, breathe, use your head, your hands, and your heart. But second of all, I'd take some sort of training. So you have an opportunity to practice. We practice on stuffed animals, and mannequins. So it's okay to make mistakes. You learn from your mistakes and you put it in muscle memory. And the other thing I would say is to always be prepared. We were talking about first aid kits, having supplies in your car or in your home, having emergency phone numbers, like a poison hotline phone number, an emergency vet in case your vet's not available, all the emergency contact phone numbers you need should not only be in your home, but they should also be in the glove box of your car. So if you have an accident or you have an emergency, you need to get in your car and go. All of your pets' vaccinations, microchip, and emergency contact information is in your glove box right next to your registration and your insurance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good idea. We also tell people to make a contact right in your phone for your pet and include all that information too, as far as keeping their microchip information readily available with a picture of their pet. So that it would be a good place to add all those extra things too.
People tell me all the time they have their ICE in case of emergency contact information in their cell phones. But when we're talking about traveling in a car, if you are injured or incapacitated, first responders generally don't look for your cell phone first. They open up your glove box to find your registration and your insurance to find out who you are. So in addition to your cell phone, you should go in dinosaur fashion, print all that information on paper, and leave it in your glove box next to your registration and insurance cards.
Oh, that's a good idea. I didn't think about that. So I know you wanted to touch on a couple of things like, so say, let's just give an example. I'm out with some friends or whatever, and I'm thinking not so much my pet, but I see a dog get hit by a car or something, and it's bleeding heavily. So what do I do?
Well, the first thing you would do is stay calm. That's always the number one action for survival in a pet emergency situation. The second thing to know is always approach the pet from the rear, from behind. You never want to make face-to-face or eye-to-eye contact. You could get hurt that way. So always approach from the rear and let the pet know that you're coming. We recommend that you stomp your foot on the ground and clap your hands and say, doggy, doggy, kitty, kitty, are you okay? To try and elicit a response. And if you get no response, then approach the pet, put your hand on the chest. You take just a second to hopefully hear some growling, whimpering, whining, or barking, but the pet's still down, so you know something's wrong. And then start to go through what we call a wellness assessment, just sort of starting at the nose, looking at the eyes, trying to see for any blood or injury, and from there, if you have growling, breathing, whimpering, or whining, you know that you don't need to perform any CPR because their heart is beating. So from there, we would go into first aid, and that's where it will be very helpful to have latex gloves and bandages and things in your first aid kit in your car so you can do something immediately and, of course, be prepared to transport the pet to the vet.
Do you give any suggestions here on, how do you, this is just a simple thing, but how do you pick up an injured pet? What would be the best way? I mean, some people may have never encountered this, but are listening because they want to know how they could help if they ever came upon a situation like this.
It also depends on the size of the pet. Picking up an injured pet can be difficult, especially if this is a Great Dane or a German Shepherd. So you would want to have a blanket or a large towel that you could slide underneath the pet and then take the corners together to sort of make a hammock or a sling so you could pull and lift the pet into your car.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense? You don't
Oh,
want to
yeah.
just pick up the pet. You want to take a blanket or a towel, slide it underneath so you have handles, and get them in your car. And of course, if you have your local vet's information, you can call ahead, especially if you have a second responder that can call ahead while you're driving and transport the pet to a vet.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. So, talk about pet CPR. That's a class that I've been wanting to take. I just haven't found the time, but I need to do that. So, talk about that for a little bit.
Well, it is very unfortunate that most people don't think about getting trained until after they've had an emergency. So I always recommend you do it before you have an emergency. But CPR for pets is a bit different than it is for people. The CPR for pets, we have 3 different kinds of CPR depending on the size of the pet. So CPR for a large, full-grown dog is different than it would be for a cat, a kitten, or a puppy, or a small dog. For those little ones, we call the CPR taco. For the large pets, we call it side to side. And then there's a third kind for what we call barrel-chested. I would think of bulldogs, the ones that are wider than they are taller.
Mm-hmm.
So it's important to know all 3 kinds so you can effectively perform CPR on any size pet.
Okay. And what are the differences? It's probably, while I'm listening to you talk, I would think similar to how you have to learn a different CPR for a baby versus learning it for an adult.
That is correct. For the little ones, we call it taco because your hand sort of makes a taco shape, and you only need one hand to perform CPR. On larger pets, we do two-handed, so you need 2 hands to effectively pump the heart.
Mm-hmm. Now, as far as the breathing goes, I've seen some of these pictures on the news of, first responders rescuing pets from a fire, and they're unresponsive, and they're giving them mouth to mouth or nose to mouth or whatever it is. What is it? What are they doing?
We call that rescue breathing. And there are many fire departments that have special oxygen masks made for pets. But as far as what I do, it's for your average pet parent. So you can take immediate action before and while transporting your pet to the vet, or if you need to call the fire department in case of a fire, you know how to do rescue breathing before they get there. And so rescue breathing can be very important. You don't have to have a special equipment like the fire department has. You can do it on your own by making an airtight seal around the nose and the mouth and giving breaths.
Okay. What else was I going to say? Oh, I know. I'm just trying to think of cases, that I've encountered recently, and I haven't encountered it, but, around the holidays, we're talking about poisons and keeping your pet safe and all this stuff. And so let's talk a little bit about poison, or a pet getting a food or a plant or something like that they shouldn't get into. What would your response be to help them immediately?
Well, poisoning actually is one of the most common emergency situations. And there are many, many things that are poisonous to pets. So the number one thing to do is